It's almost as if the story ends. We don't get an update each Christmas of what's going on. We don't get a Christmas letter filled with news from Jesus. We don't get a new version of the Bible delivered every December. So every year, we read the story again and again. And you might be wondering, so, Pastor, what's the point? The story never changes. And if you're talking about the words found here in the gospel, the ones that we read every year, then you'd be right. But if you're talking about the real story, the bigger story, the story about Christ's birth and what came next, then that's different. Because the Christmas story does change from year to year. And this is why. The Christmas story changes because we, you and I, we change. You know, that question about why the printed story ends in the Bible, I think it's because of this. I think it's because the Bible tells the story of Christ's first followers back when there were only a few. But not long after that, a lot of other people got to know about Christ and got to know the story of the first Christmas. And if we told the stories of all of the people who have come to understand what seeing the face of God was all about that night, if we tried to write them all down in one book, we couldn't contain them. It would be humongous. The national denomination of this church, the United Church of Christ that we're part of, has a motto that we use. We say, God is still speaking. And by that we mean that God doesn't stop acting in our world and in our lives. It didn't stop 2,000 years ago, and it still goes on today. It means that God's still working in our world. God is transforming it. And in fact, He's transforming us. God isn't just in the past, but He's right here and He's right now. And we, the people of God, of a still speaking God, are still listening. And we are still hearing the stories. Not just the ones that were written so long ago, but also the ones that are all around us. And even if this story we hear on Christmas Eve every year isn't changing, we're changing. And the most miraculous part of all of this, if we really are changing, if we really, really are being transformed by seeing the face of God in this tiny human form, then we are becoming the people who not only listen to the Christmas story, but we're becoming part of the people who actually become part of that story ourselves. When my kids were little, I used to love reading to them. I especially loved sharing stories of children and adults who, through their love, their kindness, and their courage, also became part of this greater Christmas story. And during this Advent season, while I was out shopping at Barnes & Noble, I ran across just such a book about a boy who lived out this type of Christmas story. And I brought it tonight because I wanted to share it with a part of it with you. It's called Wonder by R.J. Palacio, I believe it is. Has anybody read this book? I see a hand way in the back. Okay. I highly recommend it to all of you. Reading to our children is something that has been a pastime that I think is fading but should be brought back. And if you don't have a young person to read it to, I recommend you read it yourself, as I did this year. And I want to tell you a little bit about what it's about. It's about a 10-year-old boy named Augie Pullman, who, after being homeschooled for years, is about to start the 5th grade. but he's worried. How will he fit in to middle school life when he looks so different from everyone else? You see, Augie has had 27 surgeries to correct facial anomalies that he was born with. But he still has a face, after all of that earns him cruel nicknames such as Freak, Freddy Krueger, Gross Out, and Lizard Face. According to the book, though his features look like they've been melted like the drippings of a candle, and he's used to people averting their eyes when they see him, he's an engaging boy who feels pretty ordinary on the inside. He's smart and funny and kind and brave, but his father says that having Augie attend Beecher Prep School would be like sending a lamb to the slaughter. And I want to share part of an address from near the end of the book from the principal, Mr. Cushman, at Augie's 5th grade graduation after a year of both triumphs and tragedies. So listen now to part of the book Wonder. We are all gathered here together, Mr. Cushman continued, taking off his glasses and using them to point to all of us in the audience, all of your families, your friends, and your teachers, to celebrate not only your achievement this year at Beecher Middle School, but your endless possibilities. When you reflect on this past year, I want you to look at where you are now and where you've been. You've all gotten a little taller, a little stronger, and a little smarter, I hope. But the best way to measure how much you've grown isn't in inches or by the number of laps you can now run around the track, or even by your grade point average, though those things are very important to be sure. It's what you've done with your time, how you've chosen to spend your days, and whom you've touched this year. That, to me, is the greatest measure of success. He goes on to say, there's a wonderful line in a book by J.M. Barrie called The Little White Bird. In it, he writes, "Shall we make a new rule of life? Always try to be a little kinder than is necessary." Here, Mr. Tushman looked up at the audience and said, "Kinder than is necessary," he repeated. What a marvelous line, isn't it? Kinder than is necessary. Because it's not enough to just be kind. One should be kinder than is needed. Why I love that line, that concept, is that it reminds me that we carry with us as human beings not just the capacity to be kind, but the very choice of kindness. And what does that mean? How is it measured? You can't use a yardstick. It's like I was saying before, he said. It's not like measuring how much you've grown in a year. It's not exactly quantifiable, is it? How do we know then that we've been kind? What is being kind anyway? And he put his reading glasses back on again and started flipping through another book. There's another passage in a different book I'd like to share with you, he said. In Under the Eye of the Clock by Christopher Nolan, the main character is a young man who is facing some extraordinary challenges. There's this one part where someone helps him, a kid in his class. On the surface, it's a small gesture, but to this young man, whose name is Joseph, it's, well, if you permit me, he cleared his throat and he read from the book. It was at moments such as these that Joseph recognized the face of God in human form. It glimmered in their kindness to him. It glowed in their keenness. It hinted in their caring. Indeed, it caressed in their gaze. He paused and he took off his reading glasses again. It glimmered in their kindness to him, he repeated. Such a simple thing, kindness, such a simple thing. A nice word of encouragement, given when needed, an act of friendship, a passing smile. And then he closed the book and he put it down and leaned forward on the podium and said, "Children, what I want to impart to you today is the understanding of the value of that simple thing called kindness." And that's all I want to leave you with today. What I want you, my students, to take away from your middle school experience, he continued, is the sure knowledge that in the future, any future you make for yourself, anything is possible. And if every single person in this room made it a rule that wherever you are, wherever you can, wherever you go, you will try to act a little kinder than necessary, the world really would be a better place. And if you do this, if you act a little kinder than necessary, someone else, somewhere, someday, may recognize in you the face of God. Tonight, we come to celebrate the birth of a child born so long ago, and the night the world first saw the face of God in human form. And we have a story waiting for each one of us to become part of it. The child born tonight grew up to be a man who told us to live lives of peace, who told us to love our neighbors as ourselves, who told us to turn away from things that ultimately don't mean much, and instead to turn to what really matters, to turn our hearts toward God and towards one another, being just a little kinder than is actually necessary. And I wonder, what if you were to tell the second part of the Christmas story tonight? What if you were to read this passage as we read it tonight? And then, what if you were to say, here's my second part. Here's my story about what happened next. Here's my story about how I've been changed by seeing the face of God in another, or by being the face of God to another and saw that life change. Here's what happened when the gospel story intersected with my life, and then everything changed. The story is the starting point, but you are what happens next. Christmas is not just a story about Christ being born in a manger over 2,000 years ago. Christmas is about the story of Christ's love being born in our hearts each and every day. And it's the story of how you respond, not just tonight and not just tomorrow, but every day. Next December 24th, I invite you to join me back here once again. And spoiler alert, we'll be reading the same story again. But the more you open up your hearts to Christ's love this year, the more you let it be born inside of you, the better that story, your story, will be next year. May Christ's face shine brightly upon you this Christmas Eve. And may it shine even brighter in you and in our world all through the year. And all God's people said,